Okay, this is the end, right, my friends?
I knew it was going to look good. When I got together with Joel, that was one of the things I said. I didn't want the movie to cost a crazy amount of money, and I knew that he could make it look like it did. He just has so much fun with style. He's a wonderful, wonderful artist.
Joel really pressed the crew with something that I really respected and liked, which was, please pretend this is, I'll never work again after this movie. Please take all the chances that you can, and I don't mind if this is the last movie that I ever make. So he really challenged his department heads to do things that were way out of the ordinary, way out of the box, and Joel is such a good collaborator, really took in a lot of those ideas.
One of the great things, when you have a tour de force like this with acting roles and visuals, I think it does attract a lot of talent on all sides of the camera.
The look of the film is really amazing, and Matty Levatique is just a fantastic shooter.
Matty's brilliant. This is our third film. I hate to inflate his big ego any further, but the word genius is tossed around too much in our business, and it's now has no meaning. So I give him genius with a small g.
There was just immediate familiarity. They dove in from day one. Matty had a ton of ideas. Joel had a ton of ideas. There's some great palettes, some really exciting lighting designs are really conveyed in the film. I mean, it's a beautiful looking film and some really bold strokes.
He is brilliant, and I hope that we work together many times because I love working together. We did Tigerland and Phone Booth together. Those are told in completely different styles. He also did Requiem for a Dream and Pi and The Fountain. He can work in any style, as you can see in this. The Suicide Blonde sequence, which is one of my favorite sequences, I decided if she had written all over the walls, that she would have covered it. Fernley had suggested that in the piece, and so I thought, because she was called the Suicide Blonde, that if we did all of that white on white on white, the beautiful Lynn Collins being so pale and so blonde, and the pale pink slip, that it would give it its own world.
I feel like the Suicide Blonde scene speaks to everything Joel and I spoke about early on in the film. There's a lot going on in that scene, and I think it's gorgeous, and I think it's really cinematically fresh.
All the worlds that we go into are so different and contrasting with one another. For instance, we're here in the Sparrow home. I know this world because this world's kind of like my own real life. I feel very comfortable. The other worlds are fantasy, they're dark, they're so different from this loving, warm, realistic environment.
Andrew Law is our production designer, who had also worked with Joel. This is the third movie that he'd done with Joel, my second movie. Joel really pressed Andrew on this film. He was really on Andrew to just push the style and the look for this film, and especially for the storybook world. At the same time, in Walter Sparrow's house, Joel wanted the walls red, and that's a very bold and aggressive color that you don't see in many films. So even in the real world, the look of the film still had a real kind of flair, and then obviously in the storybook world really was pressed. There's a lot of locations that we used in the real world, in Walter's real world, and then redressed them for the book world. Whether the audience will put that together or not, they may not consciously, but they definitely will subconsciously. They'll feel like something's familiar, and especially as you go through the book world later in the film. Between Andrew, Matty, and Joel, watching those three guys work together was really exciting, and they were very in sync. They prepped for a very long time, probably 10 weeks, the three of them just really creating what the style of the film was. And I think it really comes through. There feels like there's a cohesion. It also is all driven by story and character too. So it's not just trying to, well, let's just do something cool over here, here's a cool shot. Like, it was all really based in story, and story was motivating that. So that's something too that I really respect and is really hard to pull off, because you see a lot of movies with a lot of handheld and maybe kind of overexposed look or real faded out, saturated colors, but it's not really driven by anything. Here, this was all driven by the story. What Walter Sparrow is going on in the real world as he's starting to fall into madness, and then the storybook world in terms of it's starting to really get edgier and edgier and darker as you get into this world. So it's all really connected.
When I initially wrote it, I was kind of inspired by Jacob's Ladder and the demons in Jacob's Ladder. There's a scene where Tim Robbins is walking across a bridge or something, and a car goes past him, and when the car goes past, you see these kind of like weird faces. And that and Munch's Scream painting. And I thought, it'd be really cool if Fingerling looked like that, which I think would have given the movie a different sort of slightly different tone to those things. But it became like just this family of sort of oddities, like Fingerling, and then like Mother Fingerling and Father Fingerling, and the rest of the world sort of looking the same. They just had a macabre quality to them. But then when you get an actor like Jim Carrey, you're like, okay, you want to see him as much as possible.
The way Fernley first envisioned it, the fantasy world was actually more of a computer generated. The characters were all these somewhat gray, amorphous people with black hollowed out eyes. The first thing I explained to Fernley, who'd never made a movie before, is that it would be very hard for anyone to get emotionally involved with those shapes for a whole movie. I thought that it would be great for the actor to play the duality.
But I always pictured those worlds as looking very different to the rest of the movie, looking much darker.
Everyone looks at those things differently, and especially as words on a page where there's no imagery at all. So it's really up to your mind to see what those worlds look like. So we took one position and created that world and how we see it, and tried to see it how Walter Sparrow would see it, him taking things that are surrounding his life, because that's all your mind really knows, and then implant them right into the book.
I felt childhood should be portrayed very much as a children's book. I would have loved to have it be three-dimensional pop-up, but we haven't gotten to that stage in film yet where we can do that on the screen, but we will get there.
Intelligent Creatures had some really good ideas in terms of the movement.
It all has a certain surreal quality to it. A 2.5D kind of approach seemed appropriate for it. And we didn't, we could have shot a lot of it. We didn't have to do what we did ultimately. But again, thematically, it just seemed to make sense. And we're just trying to ultimately create something that people haven't seen before, or not really in that form. And to ground it, it was kind of an ideology to have a certain amount of live action components to it. And it certainly made sense in establishing it because we see Jim Carrey's 8-year-old character again and again and again throughout the pop-up sequence. His classmates in the schoolhouse were supposed to have a certain kind of frozen time, not like a Matrix style, but just kind of a timeless kind of frozen time feel. They're all stills and then a certain motion blur technique added to them to give them kind of surreal out of this world quality. That juxtaposed against him, the live action green screen element of him, I think played really well and was, lived together well. On the road, as we approach him, we see his friends kind of disappearing. That in itself was kind of a little bit surreal as well. Another kind of nice element to kind of like focus our attention on, again, to him and realize it was kind of like time cuts, where it was like him and then him again and, a certain amount of a vehicle to get us there as well. The shot is like 3,000 frames, I think, in total. So on something that's that comprehensive and that has so many components to it, it's a big deal. And frankly, just integrating the transitions and getting the overall timing from one section to another is a big challenge in itself. And that is part and parcel of the creative process and going back and forth with Joel and everyone else just to make sure everybody's on board and, editorially it fits.
And again, wanted to see something that we hadn't seen before. I don't think we've seen Young Fairyland's World. I don't recall seeing that in a film. They achieved that, and it literally took about a year to just create even that sequence. It was very challenging to create. I think really delivers and feels really unique. There's a lot of visual effects in the movie. Sometimes we want to be known that there's visual effects, and there's a lot of times that we wanted to use visual effects just so it could augment the scene, but without ever feeling like you're watching visual effects.
A very graphic section of it is the Suicide Blonde sequence. We're trying to keep it grounded in reality. It's like, your version maybe mentally of what a fall out of a window could be or a suicide could be. But it's not a monster or something that's, running down the road. It's something that's based in reality. So that was one of the areas where you're trying just to make something, even though it's got a specific look to it, it's supposed to feel grounded in the real world. So you're just going back and trying to integrate your elements, making sure that it really does feel real, like it actually happened in camera on the day. There's a sequence where there's a truck that comes barreling towards Ned, kind of sitting on the road, kind of stationary. The dog and the truck couldn't coexist in terms of doing that on camera because it would have been way too dangerous. Ultimately, the dog is a separate element, a separate shot on green screen, and then the car or the truck coming at him is a separate, is a plate itself. So marrying those, and it sounds kind of simple, but it actually was a lot of effort to kind of like make the dog feel like it lived in that environment in terms of certain light wraps and rack focuses, etc., to make sure it actually really fit. So there's a series of 2 or 3 cuts, I think, where that happens. That nobody should know that actually happened. And those ultimately are kind of the fun ones from my point of view, because it's one of the greatest things is when people come up to you and say, well, I didn't realize there were any visual effects in that film. Then that's brilliant. Then you've kind of done your job.
Between Maddie and Andrew, Intelligent Creatures, and Joel, they really created, I think, a look that is very unique, but at the same time topical.
Every film is challenging. Every concept is something that conceptually probably nobody's seen before, or it's at least a twist on that. And so in that respect, it's always going to be, we're always pushing the envelope and pushing boundaries of what looks real or what can be done.
The real point of a film is to entertain you and to give you some escape and some illusion and something different, hopefully, than what's playing at the Cineplex next door. You have to take a flight of fantasy when you go into those surreal worlds. Visuals can't make a movie great, but if the story is good, it can assist you along the way.
The New York Yankees have won the World Series 23 times, starting in 1923. There are 46 chromosomes in the human body, 23 from each parent. Caesar was stabbed 23 times.
Red, 27, white, 65, 65 is 27, 92. Pink has 4 letters, 92 divided by 4. 20 fucking 3!
Basically, we live in chaos, and we know we can't control anything, which is terrifying. But somehow numbers give us this parameter, and that's how we define things. We compare salaries, we compare height, we compare weight. Certainly, the great physicists, the great scientists have reduced many things to mathematics. It's all over religion.
Just try to imagine a society without numbers. It's just impossible. It's just natural. You look down and you your fingers and you just, you know there's 10, or it's like if you didn't know there's 10, you kind of feel that you would just count them anyway in your own sort of weird number system. They're just everywhere.
Originally, mathematics was developed as a method of thinking, as a language to be able to describe the physical universe. And several civilizations did that. It wasn't one particular one.
I think it's fair to say that it's the study of shape and quantity in the broadest terms. It's a study of patterns and regularity and things that we can analyze with often the same tools as philosophy. And mathematics has very special methods for verification, determining when things are true, namely formal proofs. Try to say something universal without using mathematics, and you're stymied in no time at all. There are 3 of us sitting here. I have 5 fingers on my hand. Things like this, they naturally present themselves to us, and we think naturally in these categories.
We can't do anything in a regular day without encountering, when we use our cell phones, when we use the ATM card, there's an incredible amount of very sophisticated mathematics that makes that possible or makes that transaction secure. And most people are totally unaware of that and will probably never know it throughout their whole lives.
The fact that mathematics, once it's done by mathematicians in this abstract fashion, can actually present results that anyone can understand that are somehow magical, may to some degree also add to this almost mystical quality that people read into it. For instance, there's a famous assertion that says that every even number is the sum of 2 odd prime numbers. Prime number being a number that has no factors other than 1 in itself. Now this is, to someone like me, gorgeous. It's also tantalizing beyond belief because this thing has not been proven yet. But we believe it firmly because all the evidence is there. On the other hand, if you look at the first so many trillion even numbers with the most powerful computer you haven't even begun to do any calculations yet, because numbers, of course, we know, go on forever. There's an infinite collection of them. So if there is a violator, that boy might be so huge we couldn't get to it in many lifetimes. So nonetheless, if you meet someone in the street and you start chatting to this person about this problem, you can explain it very easily, and it looks like magic. So all of a sudden mathematicians start looking like magicians. And our motivating force, or the motivating force behind why we do this, is what Jackie and Herbert are talking about. I mean, this is not only universal, it is gorgeous stuff. We talk about elegance and beauty because of the fact that some deep, deep things can be actually touched by us with our intelligence. And they will never be disproved. They're correct. They've been proven. We're done. It's deep stuff.
With this idea of just even the number 1 existing, and then that there is a successor to 1, and that then there is a successor to that, we can build up and the entire set of positive integers and with very careful logic define all the other numbers that we work with, examine their properties, again using what counts as our method of evidence, namely mathematical proof, to arrive at all these properties.
I think that in a profound sense, mathematics is one of the most profound examples of a structure.
The Earth's axis is tilted at 23.5 degrees. 5 is 2 plus 3. It takes 23 seconds for the blood to circulate in the human body. Mayan calendar ends on December 23rd, 2012. 20 plus 1 plus 2 is 23.
I did not know anything about the 23 phenomenon, but there are many numbers, as we all know, that are famous. 7, lucky 7, and unlucky 13, and 666, and I understand, someone told me in China it's 3/8 is considered very good luck.
I actually changed the name of my company to JC23 a couple of years ago because I've had kind of an obsession with this number for a long time. It ended up kind of culminating in realizing that the 23rd Psalm was about living without fear. And so that's why I changed the name of my company to that.
What's interesting is people are kind of haunted by numbers. As I've shared the 23 enigma with other people, they say, oh yeah, my number is 7, or my number is, 55, and my number is 692, and when I got on board this ship, I was in room 692. Everyone has this story about a certain number that constantly repeats itself in their lives.
It's like, I think, number 13. Everybody knows of number 13. Some people will say it's unlucky, and others will be like, it's just a number, it's nothing unlucky. Superstitions, people will walk under ladders, other people will avoid it.
Many buildings do not have a 13th floor. It goes 12 and 14. But if you live on 14, you're really on the 13th floor. So who are you kidding? I mean, is there some 13 God that knows you're on the 14th floor when you're really on the 13th floor? When you really come down to it, if you look at the history of the world, the major religion has really been superstition. It's magical thinking.
I think that's what's really fun about this whole concept of the 23 is that it taps into this need people have to believe in magical things.
I think it's the same kind of thing as people believe in God. People just gravitate towards sometimes the more mysterious explanations for things.
A name is just a name, and a number is just a number. Isn't it?
When we take a look at, let's say, from the perspective of really the godfather of numerology, Pythagoras, who was the Greek mystic mathematician who lived 2,500 years ago, he would say that numbers are a manifestation of the divine. He would say that numbers are in everything. And that inspired him to create the 7-note scale, which is the basis of all Western music. The Pythagorean theorem that we still study in school today in mathematics. He'd say that it was at the root of everything in the universe. So they have a tremendous importance. It's behind all manifestation. A numerologist sees you as a human being, as your own song. You're a walking vibration. Like a song will have chords and a beat and different melodies, and that can all be printed out and sampled or recorded, and you could see their cycles and vibrations. And when a numerologist looks at a person and looks at their numbers, we see sort of the vibrational aspect or the song that person sings as their own individuality, who they are, their characteristics, what makes them up, why they do the things they do, their natural tendencies. So we talk about the vibration of somebody. We talk about how they manifest themselves, how they react in society, who they are as a person. That's the vibration of anything for that matter, but a person in particular. Numbers are really, in essence, a symbol of what a vibration is. So when we take a look at the single integers 1 through 9, we're looking at the base root of every single number, because any number, whether it be a double-digit number, or a triple-digit number, or a 1,000-digit number, can be added down to one digit. So in case of 23, for example, 2 and 3 added together make 5. So 5 is the root of that number. That's the root vibration that it's operating. Now 23 is a special kind of 5. Because we're combining the energies or the vibration of the 2 and the vibration of the 3 together. So it's creating sort of a mishmash of energies there. But for all intents and purposes, it's a 5. It's a 5 root vibration. It's so simple if you really think about it. These numbers do have symbolic meanings in our life. When you're standing alone, you're an individual. You're a one person upright. It represents the singular aspect of anything, the individuality of anything. 2, you bring in the other. Now you have right and wrong, you have duality, you have black and white. So much of life is based on this dualistic principle. So many religious disciplines are train you in order to go beyond duality or the black and white of everything to see things in a more universal way. 3 is the product of 1 and 2. So it represents creativity. It's the creative number. It's the Trinity. It's the creative principle. And 4 is the first time we have the power of manifestation, or what we call the 4 elements. In astrology, it's the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. You're sitting on 4 legs of a chair. It represents the foundation and stability of everything. It's the square. And what does a 5 do? And this is the most important thing here. The 5 breaks the stability of the 4. There's the chaos factor. Beyond 5, we have 6, which is a number of harmony. There's 6 sides to a cube. There's a harmony and a symmetry with the number 6. In fact, people who have 6 prominent in their charts have ability in design because they have aesthetic understanding of things, from a symmetrical point of view. And then we have 7. Well, it's interesting because the world that we live in is based on 6 directions: up, down, north, south, east, and west. It's the 3-dimensional continuum, or the 3-dimensional world that we live in and move around in, right? What's 7? That's why it's a number of spirituality. Because 7 is the inner spirit, or the inner aspect that you can't see, that lies within the 3-dimensional world, or the world of the directions, the 6 directions. It's the middle point. Now these are kind of hard things to understand, but that's why 7 is considered an esoteric number. It's not easily understood. 8 is the octave. If you play piano, you'll know from one key to the higher key of the same note, low C to the next higher C is an octave. It's 8 notes. 8 has a lot of power to it and authority. It brings the higher energy and manifests in the lower energy, and I'll show you how it does it. If you take a look at an 8, it's 2 circles, and the upper circle can represent your mind, your thoughts, up here, and then the lower circle represents the material womb, or the material world. So it's bringing heaven on earth, or your creative, mind, or your thoughts, and manifesting it. So it has a manifesting power and authority to it. And 9 is so simple. What is it in the scheme of things? If 1 is the first single integer, what's 9? The last. And so in many respects, 9 is the most wise number because it has the experience of all the numbers preceding it. And many people who have 9 prominent in their chart are very wise, universally thinking people. They see everyone in a universal perspective. And they do care about a lot of people in general. They understand, they have compassion. Maybe it's because of their past experiences. So those are the basic principles, 1 through 9. When I studied the number 23 and did some more research on it and looked at some of the various ancient traditions involving numbers, the I Ching jumped out at me. The I Ching is the oldest philosophical written text in China, and it's reported to be maybe even 5,000 years old. And in it you have 64 symbols, numbered symbols called hexagrams. And the I Ching is supposed to be able to take all the random events in life and bring order to them. Bring the past with the future together. It's supposed to be this incredible, magical tool almost. And it's been written about over thousands of years. Even Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher, wrote his spin on it. But if you take a look at the 23rd symbol, what does it mean? This is 5,000 years ago. It means breaking apart, dissolution, disarray, chaos, even violence. The wise teachers and writers of the I Ching say that you have a choice, the wise usage of an energy or the negative usage of an energy. Jim Carrey's character is obviously being haunted by a number, and he's out of control, and he's not conscious of what's happening in his life. Maybe that number's trying to tell him something, and that could create, as a catalyst, positive change. But to become out of control, to become chaotic, to lose your mind, obviously this is the positive usage of a number. 5 isn't a bad number. It shouldn't be demonized, because the opportunity with the 5 is to bring change, which means new possibilities in your life. It can be very productive. Actually, people who have the number 23-5 in their chart tend to have this fight in themselves between security and freedom. And it creates an entirely dramatic situation where they're constantly fearing the change, yet they really want it. So any number you have to take a look at from the perspective of the balanced usage of it. Any number can become malefic or problematic if it's not used properly. And any number can be used with great success. We take a look at somebody who keeps seeing a number over and over again. This is very common. I've had Countless people call me and contact me. I keep seeing 1111 every single time I look at a clock. Or I keep seeing this number everywhere I go. People from all walks of life. It's not this uncommon, crazy thing. The great early 20th century psychologist, Carl Jung, who was a really special person in his field because he saw validity in these systems, he believed that the power of the I Ching matched or reinforced his view of a theory he came up with called archetypes. And archetypes were basically these patterns or images that are within every human being's mind. They're in the recesses of all of our unconscious minds. He called it the collective unconscious. And if we really have the deeper meanings of numbers embedded in our psyches on an unconscious level, if we were going to have something happen in our life, for example, something chaotic or crazy like that, does it make sense that somebody would see the number 23 manifested in their life over and over again? Is this some sort of unconscious reaction to what's happening in their life? Jung would say probably so. And that's fascinating. One great numerological tradition is the Kabbalistic tradition. Kabbalah is Hebrew mysticism. The background of Kabbalah stems from the mystical usage of numbers and letters. That is one aspect of it that's very prominent within its teachings. And it's based on the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, 22 is a very powerful number. For example, pi is signified by 22/7, the fraction. If we take a look at the number 22 and we see it from the perspective of the Kabbalists, they believed essentially that God manifests this world as we see it in 22 different steps. That this phenomenal world where things happen, we can see, that we live and breathe in, was manifested through symbolically the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And here we are in this 22nd place, if you will. So what's 23? If everything that we see and everything around us is based on these 22 principles, what's 23? It breaks it. It breaks it wide open. It creates an entirely new manifestation. So you could see how the number 23 can be associated with volatility. The Illuminati, which is at the source of so many conspiracy theories today. The Illuminati was a secret society started in the 18th century. They chose as their secret number 23. Why? Because they wanted to break apart. They wanted to usher in a new age. They wanted to destroy the powers that be. And in their mind, they were thinking that this is the right thing to do. Monarchy is corrupt. We have the true spiritual knowledge. What we're doing is going to help people. But did they advocate violence in their message in order to do this? Is that the wrong usage, as the I Ching says? Is this the wrong way to use the 23? Is that the wise way to use it? I mean, you have great intentions, but how are you going to carry this out? Here we have Jim Carrey's character haunted by the number 23. Like, he sees it everywhere. It manifests in every aspect of his life. Do you know that he's not the only one? Do you know that there's actually an entire subculture of people called the 2030ans who actually all have that in common, that they all see the number 23 throughout their lives. And they actually have their websites, they talk to each other, they're around the whole world. And for some reason, they're all obsessed with this number. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? If 23 signifies waking up to breaking out of our own matrix of this world that we see, cultural conditioning, if you will, psychological conditioning from our parents or from our environment, maybe 23 is a good thing in the sense that it helps us to wake up and find a new way, a fresh perspective, if you will. But maybe it's not. Maybe if it's used inappropriately, it's anarchy, it's revolution, without any real truth behind it. We have our choice with our numbers. Any number that you may have in your chart, you have a choice to use it in any particular way.
The Titanic sank on the morning of April 15th, 1912. That's 415-1912. 23. The Hiroshima bomb was dropped at 8:15. 8 plus 15 is 23. Charles Manson was born November 12th. 11 plus 12 is 23.
I think that the number 23 is about much more than just certainly a number, but it is about where obsession can become very destructive. And I think most of us know that in our own life. I think everybody has obsessions. I would imagine money is a biggie for a lot of people, but some people have the obvious ones: alcohol, drugs, food, gambling, things that plague people's lives. But there's always a point where obsession turns into something very destructive. It's the part of him that he doesn't want to acknowledge. So the number is really representative of something that isn't a number. It's really a conscience. And the obsession with it is something he can't shake because he hasn't gotten to the bottom of what it is. So it isn't really the number. But obsession is never what it really is. It's the thing underneath it.
There are many, many people who I treat specifically with obsessions about numbers and compulsions related to those obsessions about numbers. For example, it's very common for people to come into my office and have great discomfort with the number 6 because of 666 from the book of Revelations. It can also play out not just in terms of a fear of the number 6, but numbers that add up to 6. For example, a 5 and a 1, or a 3 and a 3. So much like how Walter is very concerned about things adding up to 23, or how 2 and 3 might add up to something else, I have lots of clients with that kind of concern. Another major number that people really freak out about is the number 13. Obviously, from when we're very young, we're told that 13 is bad luck, that kind of thing. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a very specific condition in which people have repeated, intrusive, unwanted thoughts that cause them distress. And in order to get rid of the anxiety produced by those thoughts, they will do compulsions. Sometimes those compulsions are very overt, like washing their hands or checking a door lock repeatedly. And sometimes those compulsions are much more subtle, such as asking people for reassurance, such as, "Are you sure I didn't run somebody over?" Or quite often doing what we call mental compulsions, where they're constantly reviewing something in their head, trying to prove to themselves that a bad event didn't occur, or that they didn't do something bad. The two distinct components of OCD are right there in the title, obsessions and compulsions. And again, the obsessions are the thinking part. For example, you can really conceptualize the obsessions as what-if statements. What if I ran somebody over? What if something happens because I didn't avoid the number 6? And the compulsions are the behaviors that people do in response to the anxiety caused by those obsessions. So they do the compulsions with the direct purpose of trying to get rid of the anxiety. The public's idea of what OCD is actually fairly limited, and it's been limited by a number of factors, not the least of which is how it's portrayed in the media. It's very easy to portray somebody with contamination fears, which is a part of OCD, because they oftentimes will be doing things like washing their hands compulsively, or somebody who has very overt behaviors, such as having to avoid stepping on cracks, that kind of thing. So the public oftentimes only sees that part of OCD, the more obvious forms. But there's a whole other world of OCD, which is what we call obsessional OCD, which is where people have these very, very distressing thoughts that really everybody has from time to time. But for these people, they get really stuck on these thoughts. And when they get stuck on these thoughts, it quite often fits into categories such as what we call harming obsessions. Harming obsessions is where a person is afraid that they are going to be responsible for somebody being harmed, either through a direct act, such as running somebody over, or through an indirect or just inadvertent act, such as, what if I drop something and somebody slips on it and breaks their neck? And they can be obsessed with this. We all have thoughts, and then we all have responses to our thoughts. And in OCD, the problem is that people will respond behaviorally to a thought that doesn't really merit any thought whatsoever. It doesn't deserve any attention. Let's assume somebody is avoiding certain numbers. We would have them purposely expose themselves to those numbers. For example, if they're avoiding 2s and 3s, I would want them to expose themselves to 2s and 3s. On the other hand, if somebody is spending a lot of time counting 2s and 3s and looking for 2s and 3s, I would want them to do the exact opposite. I would say, I want you to stop counting. And they're going to say, well, I feel like I have no choice, I have to. And I would say, no, you have a choice. You may not like the discomfort you're going to feel in the process of not feeding that obsession. They may not like the anxiety they're going to feel and the thoughts that they're going to have, but they do have ultimately the power to not do the counting. See, the more the character looks at numbers and focuses on those numbers, the more the obsession's going to grow. Much like the character in the film who says to Jim Carrey, if you go looking for this number, you're going to find it. I really believe that's the case. The truth of the matter is that we are designed, we are hardwired to seek meaning and to look for connections in things and to try to understand things. It's essentially what separates us from, lower animals, is that I don't think dogs are sitting around, thinking about the meaning of life, but we do.
If you search history and search the Bible and search a lot of good events and also catastrophes, 23 can be easily found in it. But as Virginia Madsen says in the movie, you find it because you're looking for it. And maybe if it was 50 or 150, we would now be talking about that.
There's a certain amount of it that you can chalk up to, you know, if you look for it, you're going to find it. But there's a lot of it that you can't chalk up that way. There's a lot of it that's just too coincidental.
I kind of don't believe in anything and believe in everything. We live in a universe that's beyond our measure. I don't know. I don't know anything. Like someone being very assured of what happens after they die. I'm glad they're so sure. I don't know. No, I don't know about any enigmas.
I think we're at loose in the world of form. You get whatever you're looking for, basically, in the world. That's my absolute belief about everything. That doesn't make it any less fascinating for me. It's the moment when you become aware of the magic again. A little blip saying, there's something more.